Hello! So I have a quick question for you. Now when I say carnivore, what is the first thing that comes to mind? I can almost guarantee you that it wasn't frogs, but that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today. I'm going to lay down some really basic facts about the frogs, and then I'm going to dive into some really specific species that are from this family. Now, frogs are defined as a tailless, leaping amphibian. There are over 5,000 species that live on every single continent except for Antarctica. I'm sure you've heard of toads, and have you ever wondered what exactly is the difference between a toad and a frog? Well, I can tell you that there really isn't one. All toads are frogs, but not all frogs are toads. It's really just a superficial descriptor used to differentiate between the two. Usually, frogs have longer limbs and are a bit wetter, whereas toads have stumpier legs and have drier, wartier skin. On average, depending on the species, they usually live around 7 to 10 years, and depending on where they live, they go through a hibernation cycle as well. This is one of the few species that go through a metamorphosis. They are hatched from an egg into a tadpole, then turn into a froglet, then a frog. Now, tadpoles are strictly herbivores. They eat only plant matter, whereas froglets are omnivores. They eat a mix between the two, and frogs are actually carnivores. They eat a mix of bugs, small lizards, and some kind of birds. Frogs come in a wide variety of colors that usually have to do with either camouflaging, that are duller colorations, or poisoning, and those are usually brighter colors. They also come in a very big difference between sizes as well. The largest is actually over a foot long and weighs over 7 pounds. That would be the Goliath frog. Now the first specific frog that I want to talk to you about is actually called the purple frog. The purple frog is native to western India. It is most similar to ancient frogs that lived over 130 million years ago. In Senevirathanes, From Clinging to Digging, Volume 11 of +1, he actually talks about the difference between the tadpoles of this species versus the adults. Tadpoles are strictly suited for clinging to life in the streams. They have a large mouth sucker that they use to attach themselves to rocks, and by using that, then they don't drift away in the streams, and they are also able to eat plant matter on the rocks. This is compared to the adults that are very, very suited to burrowing. They have a very wedge-like skull, and they have tiny beady eyes with hind legs that are shovel-shaped that allow them to dig through the muck. They live the rest of their lives after metamorphosizing into frogs underground. They only come out for 2 weeks during monsoon season to mate. What's most interesting about them is that most people, when they see them, they consider it to be a frog without a shell. Personally, I think it looks very similar to a mole, because their nose is a long and narrow nose that looks like a mole's nose, and they have a very bloated purplish-grayish body. The second frog that I'm going to talk to you about is the black-legged poison dart frog. This is native to South America, and I'm sure you've heard the term poison dart frog before. This comes from the Aboriginals, who use the poison dart frog specifically to rub the tips of their darts and arrows. This allows them to be better at hunting, specifically because if they only wound an animal, they can use the toxins from the frog to paralyze the animal so they don't have to wait for it to officially die of its wounds from severity. Now, in Summers, Volume 98 of PNAS, Evolution of Coloration and Toxicity in Frog Families, they talk about the specific types of toxins and how that relates to the severity and lethality of frogs. This specific frog species has a specific toxin called batrotoxin. Batrotoxin is an extremely lethal toxin. This frog has over 150 micrograms covering its body. That may not seem like a lot, but in humans it takes from 2 micrograms to 200 micrograms in order to kill a human being. And this frog is one of the few frogs that actually have human fatalities listed. The coloration of this frog is incredibly bright. It is usually orangish or yellow with dark colored limbs as well. This is a typical warning of its poisonous nature and used to dissuade any enemies from trying to bite into it. It is the 3rd most poisonous frog in the world, and what's specifically interesting about this frog is that depending on its diet, it can actually change the toxicity of it. Usually these frogs eat the forest floor insects that are typical. Mosquitoes, millipedes, beetles, but in a lab-grown setting, they decided to give it fruit flies. And when they give it fruit flies, it actually lessened the degree of the toxins within its body. The last frog that I'm going to talk to you about is actually not a specific species, but it's actually a genus. This genus is called Paedopranes. Now, this is a most interesting species because it's only native to Papua New Guinea, and there are only 7 species that have been discovered. It's a relatively new branch. It was only discovered 14 years ago. They live only on the forest floor, and scientists only found them because they were trying to listen for a unique frog call and heard this frog's call and couldn't identify where it was coming from or the species as well. So what they did is they took moist grass clumplets and they put it in bags, and when they did, they found teeny tiny frogs hopping around. These frogs are as small as 7.7 milliliters. Millimeters. This may sound not quite as small as you think, but it's actually half the size of a dime. They are so small that they have less functioning balance-ish systems, which means that when they hop, they don't hop quite as well as they think, and they fall and land face first. I'd be interesting to know exactly which of these frogs was the most interesting to you or odd. Feel free to tell me in the comments. Thank you.